Hey everyone, it's Bruno, and I wanted to talk about the problem with the commonly given advice to newer game developers of just make small games. Now, making small games, I would say, is objectively the best and quickest way to learn how to become a game dev. You get a ton of experience making multiple code systems from the ground up, so it's a really good way to learn hard skills. But also from the soft skills side, you're finishing games, and that teaches you a lot about scoping, project management, and just everything else around releasing a game. The main issue with the advice of make small games, though, is that it's just not fun for a lot of people. And if it's not fun, people are going to quit. And so this best strategy to learn game development actually turns into the worst strategy because it's a recipe for burnout for a lot of people attempting to make games. And if you're one of those people, maybe making your overly ambitious dream game is the best choice because, well, you're not likely to release your dream game and you're probably going to have regrets about doing it, but it will continue to let you make games. It will continue to motivate you to make games, and hopefully by the time you realize you've bitten off more than you can chew, you will have gained an appreciation from game dev as a whole, and you'll be ready to adjust your strategy. So if I was going to make like a tier list of learning game dev from the novice to the intermediate phases, I would say that making small games is S tier, and making overly ambitious dream games is C tier. But I would also say that making small games that you don't enjoy is F tier. So there needs to be some form of compromise because I don't think creating C game, like a C tier strategy of making your own overly ambitious dream game is, well, I think we should avoid it still. And so I would instead use the advice, make the smallest game that you want to make. Now, if you're a game developer, you probably spent at least a decade being a hardcore gamer, and from then you should have multiple ideas of what games that you want to make. You probably have come up with a game that you almost like a lot, but you have so many issues with aspects and like, hey, I want to make a game like that, but I want to fix all the things that piss me off about it. That's a good idea, especially if it's one you think that can be completed in less than a year or 2 years probably, because the scope will, you won't be able to understand the scope. Like with a developer like Toby Fox, his dream game was Deltarune, and it was a legitimate dream game. He woke up from a fever dream and wrote down his dream so that he wouldn't forget it, and that's Deltarune. But before he made Deltarune, he made Undertale because he was like, look, I need to gain the skills to be able to make a much larger RPG. And so that was his compromise. And that's a good example of make the smallest game that you are willing to make. It can be a range. Undertale still took a lot of time for him to make, but still, maybe you can go for something smaller. Because I know that for me, when I sort of got out of the beginner stages of game development, I got stuck on two pretty big 3D projects. One took 6 months to make. Well, one took like 6 months until I realized this is a bad idea. Another game took a year before I realized it was a bad idea. And then after that, I was like, I'm sick of wasting time. I should make a smaller game. And so I made a 30-minute game called Platform Gun, and that got me to a point where I could be a lot more realistic about larger projects. So that project took me 6 months to make, 6 months to create and finish a game. And from there, I learned a lot more about project management, scoping, and I was able to really plan well for my next game, Heal to Death, which is an MMORPG healer in a roguelike. Very, very niche, very unique game, but that took me 20 months to make, and it was still, I can't believe I made that in 20 months. But I would have never been able to do that had I not made the 6-month Platform Gun. And the skills that I learned from finishing Platform Gun ended up being that knowing how to wrap up a project is really important. But I think it also kind of taught me it got me to reflect on what my limits as a game dev was a little bit better than failing all the time with the big projects. And so by completing games, I now know where are my limits as a game developer. And so because I have a much better idea of my limits, I'm able to take on projects, and if they're above my ability, instead of having to waste 6 months or a year to figure out that they're above my ability, I can throw them out in a month or two, which is like a big time saving and opportunity cost. And if you want my thoughts on basically making games above your ability and what you should do about it, well, you should check out my video, Making Games Above Your Ability. The link is in the description. See yous, have a good one. Bye.